Okay, welcome back to the Essentials. We're working on a new title for this show, and so maybe we'll ask you out there, and we'll put it in the chat. As we will also ask you to always to like and subscribe because we love going into this deep dive into the library of these films. You know, I'm Chase the Hijacker, joined by once again by my partner Dan Halpern. Say what up.
Hey guys, what's going on?
All right. So, that's my Matthew McConaughey. So, this is part two of our Sidney Poitier collection. I look into the fantastic works of Sidney Poitier. And what we're going to do in this particular part, as you know, we're always looking at the triptych. We're going to look at Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, To Serve with Love, and Uptown Saturday Night. So, I mean, obviously, by this point in time, Sidney is the star that he is and everything, but he's always kind of like battling racism in a, poised kind of way. So, and he always needs the support, obviously, of a white actor to do it. And so, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? He does it very well with the tremendous two actors, Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. So, Daniel, hit us with the facts.
Yeah, so this movie also was directed by Stanley Kramer, who in part one we talked about regarding the Defiant Ones. This was the first major Hollywood film to depict an interracial marriage. And to put into the time context for a lot of people who don't know, the movie was filmed in the spring of 1967. And it was released at the end of 1967. But when they were filming this
Wait. You said 57 and 67. Which
67, sorry, 67, yeah. It was filmed in the spring of 1967 and released in the winter of 1967. And that when this movie was being filmed, it was still illegal in 17 states for interracial marriages. And it was struck down by the United States Supreme Court on June 12, 1967, 3 weeks after this film was made, was the last day of shooting. And it was also 2 days after Spencer Tracy died.
What, that it became legal or that
it struck down that it was illegal, you know what I mean? So, but while they were shooting it, and 1/3 of the country, it was still illegal for a white man or a white person or a black person to marry, you know? This was and then Spencer Tracy, who was very ill.
He was sick during the making of it, right?
He was sick that they could only shoot for about 3 hours a day with him.
Wow.
They had to structure the whole schedule around his health.
His movements were very subtle, weren't they, and stuff like that.
Yeah, he died I think a little less than 3 weeks after the filming was done. This was the ninth film that Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn acted together in, and it's also important to note that they had a probably 30-year plus on and off personal relationship between each other. Here's an interesting fact that you probably didn't know, that the screenwriter of the movie, who wrote a lot of the well-known films, including It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, right?
Love that.
He actually was an American who, at that time and had for many years and for most of his adult life, actually lived in England, like you.
Wow! Wow! Yeah.
And I think he came to prominence in the 50s by doing a famous English film with Alec Guinness and Peter Sellers called The Lady Killers.
Of course, man, The Lady Killers, fantastic movie. It was an Ealing Studios film, that one.
Exactly.
Which is here in London.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it also kind of goes to show for people who are watching this, wherever they're watching, that if you are, if you are able to become a successful writer or creative or whatever, you can live wherever you want. They'll come find you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
but also too, that was the big thing in 50s and 60s was Americans trying to come over to England because of the way the English system is set up, free healthcare and all of that. And that's where the supposed evil of communism came about, but we won't go there. Sure. Who's the actress who played the girl?
I forgot her name because she didn't act in a lot of stuff, but it turns out in real life.
Yeah, obviously she was ingenue, but I was just wondering if you knew about why she was.
She was cast because she's actually in real life. She's Katharine Hepburn's niece.
Oh God, the family affair. I did not know that
You
and
know,
everything because she actually didn't add anything, and it was really strange because looking at her and Sydney, there was no chemistry whatsoever between the two. And on the one hand, you could kind of put it off to his being refined and poised,
mm,
especially because they were at a family dinner and stuff like that. But there was nothing there between the two of them. You know what I mean? And there would seem to be an age difference because she seemed like she was very
well,
much younger
I
than he
kind of
was.
remember that they talked about that she was 23 and he was 37 or something like that.
Hmm.
The
Yeah, which
movie,
was not a cool thing.
yeah, then the movie was it was nominated for 10 Oscars. Stanley Kramer actually made, I didn't know this, he did an unsold TV pilot in 1975.
Mm.
So, and
What for
then there was
this?
for this, yeah, but never went anywhere. And then there was that sort of loose remake, Guess Who, with that
Yes.
with Ashton Kutcher and Bernie Mac, which we don't need to like even talk about here because it's pretty pointless.
Yeah.
But the things I kind of wanted to talk about this film, and I know you want to take away and talk about the other stuff, is that when I'm watching this film now, and I just rewatched it, in the last few days, after many years with sort of fresh eyes. Probably I hadn't seen it for 20 or 25 years or a long time, right? But when I look at the Sidney Poitier character, and I look at the Katharine Hepburn's niece, or the daughter character,
Hmm.
and I started thinking to realize that, like, they met in Hawaii. I couldn't help but sort of think, like, man, this couple here, they could have been like the parents of Obama, right?
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
like that's the same dynamic that you're facing. It's like if you look at Barack Obama, there are some parallels, definitely sort of the same. It was a few years later, but not that many years later. But also the fact that, I was actually talking to my mother about this. She said that, like, how Sidney Poitier seemed to be cast as sort of like, in most of these roles of that era, he was almost cast like almost like angelic type. You know what I mean? He was perfect. You
He was
know,
perfect. Yeah.
he was perfect because in a lot of ways, I guess, to America at that time, if you had one guy who was like the representation, good or bad, of the entire African American community, this guy had to literally be perfect
Yeah.
in every
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And maybe that's also where you even see the point where I remember there was a line where they were talking about whether they had sex yet or not, and she said no, we hadn't had sex. It was almost like they neutered, if you know what I'm saying, like they neutered,
I
they
could do a
neutered
whole
her,
show on the nuded black man, bros. Trust
you
me.
know.
I could do a whole
And
show on the nuded
so
black
those are
man.
my thoughts about the film. I know you have a lot more, so
Well, I mean, obviously, what was great about the dynamic of the characters and the interrelationships was we got to meet her parents, who was obviously Spencer and Catherine Hepburn, but we got to meet his parents, and his father was a mailman and his mom was a maid and everything like that, and you know, but it's like that defiance. Look, man, don't tell me what to do. To only anger he had was in the scene with his father and not with Sydney. I mean, not with Spencer and everything. But then Spencer even made it a point to say that you seem to care about what I think. I don't know why you care about what I think, bro. You know what I mean? And but that shows how much prominence a black man of that period will put on to gaining that respect to even walked into this world. But also, let's look at that time. Like, so what we have is we got the infamous kiss between Nat King Cole and Petula Clark or Candy Clark on television. You
mm,
know, that led to the infamous kiss of Captain Kirk, and Uhura. Do you know what I mean? But here in the movie, we didn't get this infamous kiss. I think they gave us a silhouette or something like that of them, being close or something like that. But so that's pretty strange. But it goes towards, like you were saying before, about the way the world is when in accepting this movie. But I mean, like, it all really came down to Spencer Tracy's speech, about what the youth has to look forward to. And he was speaking to that youth out there that wanted the international, diverse world that hopefully we do live in, and that was a start because, like, people are people, and that was what the movie was supposed to be about. So let's have the argument. Let's talk about the ins and outs and the do's and don'ts. But it was mainly about, look, if you love each other, hold on to that. And I think that was really powerful. And as I grew up watching that film, it always was like that speech was the thing for me. And everything, because I guess I always looked at, yeah, I don't want to be told who I will fall in love with or whatever, blah blah blah. And like if I did, fall in love with a person like a white woman or whatever, that I would have this movie to kind of like inspire. And so it was an inspirational film. So yeah, I guess Who's Coming to Dinner? It was a great film, but the only thing was, it's funny how you use the nude black man scenario, because Sidney he wasn't proactive in this film, like, because he said, I'll do whatever you say, sir. Do you know what I mean? And that's not the Sidney Poitier that we were watching and continue to watch, So he didn't make a proactive choice, which was strange and everything. But hey, it's what it is. So,
and the one thing I want to say in regards to just in general about Spencer Tracy, because I think a lot of people, especially this era, don't know Spencer Tracy. I always felt that when you watch Spencer Tracy, and he was one of the very few actors like this, is that he never was acting. He just was. You know what I mean?
Acting is being.
And he was just like, and he was one of those few guys who he's there and he opens his mouth and you just believed anything that came out of his mouth. That he was that guy at that moment. And he had such conviction of whatever he was saying, whether he really did or not, who knows? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no. It's really good, and it's funny how you mentioned It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, which is one of my favorite films. But he must have been sick at the making of that film, which probably happened before this one, if he died not long after this one, and everything. And again, his movements were slow, but his command of voice and character, like you said, is real. So anyway, like moving then to the next one of To Serve with Love. Now, let me start off on this one, because I always said that this is like my favorite film. Well, one of my favorite films. I'm not gonna say it's the number one, but it's definitely in my top 5, because it's like there's something about it. In watching this film, it's like I became like Sir, the Mark Thackeray character, coming to England, teaching and everything else like that. And, and I realized that people can accept you if you accept yourself. You know what I mean? And if you have the power of your conviction. And I think that's what was going on here. I mean, like, he starts out like looking for all kind of jobs, and, he kept getting turned down. But this was like the one place that didn't turn him down. So it's like, okay, I'll spend my time here. And I don't think he said, I'm going to be a teacher. It's not like you could do that nowadays. You can't just go in and teach in the school, even if it's the lowest of the low rung, and everything. But it was a job for him, But then he just taught these kids manners. And it was like a Miss Manners kind of thing in St. Trinian's, But it was fantastic. I had a quiz on this the other day, where it's like we were talking about the relationship between him and Judy Geeson. And then it makes me kind of think, yeah, man, what's up with these movies? Sidney's with these young white women. Because he did marry a white woman. His wife was white,
Joanna Shimkus.
Yeah, he had like 2 beautiful daughters. I wonder what the age gap in there is.
It's about 20 years. It's about 15 or 20 years.
Get out, really?
Yeah, she's mid-70s or something.
Wow, Sidney. But either way you look at it, though, is that, so I remember a discussion that we had, we had a conversation about the quiz about that relationship between him and Judy Geeson character, and was it overly sexualized or whatever. And I'm like, well, I don't think it was. I just think she was supposed to be a young woman who was enamored, because she never, not only just seen a black man, but never seen a man really that demanded that kind of respect. And him and the director was very clear, right, in that relationship, that there was nothing untoward from him, inspiring anything, where would you have a plethora of nowadays, right? How do you trust your teachers, whatever, I don't know. But this film was really good on the characters. And I love films, like I've said before about 12 Angry Men. I love films where, even though we had names of the kids, the director really worked on their characterizations, to making them archetypes. Because if they're archetypes of kid types, right? Which they were. You know, they are more indelible as characters and everything. And, you know, so this was really cool, like how the shift happens. You know, they start out hating him and then they end up loving him and everything. But I think the main thing he taught them, which I wanted to point out, was the Seals character, the young black man whose mom died, you know, and like one hand, he was in the side of the room. Other kids didn't care about him. But then it's kind of like, because they were liking this black teacher, I think they started to accept him a little bit more. And then when his mom died, they were like collecting money for flowers. And they said, you know, you take it over there. And then they were like, nobody could take it. And, you know what I mean? And so they all go to the mom's funeral in the end, which was kind of beautiful and stuff. And I love that. So anyway, that's what I want to say about Circle. What about you?
Well, you know, I have some, you know, some of the facts that you like to hear. This first of all, it was directed by James Clavell, who didn't really direct that many movies, but he had a pretty, very interesting and varied career. Like, he wrote the screenplay for The Fly.
The original Fly, or the Vincent Price Fly?
The Vincent Price. Yeah, the Vincent Price Fly. And then he became a book author. And his most famous book was Shogun.
Richard Chamberlain TV series.
Richard Chamberlain TV series, that miniseries, you know. And so here's a guy who like started out as a screenwriter, then became a director, and then he just became this really huge author. His book sold millions and millions of copies all over the world.
That's amazing, man, because that's about the kind of like a white man in the Chinese world or Japanese world, excuse me, and everything. So he seems to always kind of like deal with that kind of subject matter. So that's really interesting.
Right. And I believe this was the first film that, like, somebody that we don't really know that much about over here, but I'm sure she's a superstar in England, is Lulu.
Yeah, obviously the singer of the theme song, yeah.
So she was in the film. Interesting, Sidney Poitier, because it was a kind of a low budget film, he got paid maybe about $30,000 for, which in today's dollars is about $250,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but for a guy who was as huge as Sidney Poitier was really not much, right? But basically, his deal was he got 30 grand up front, but he got 10% of the box office gross. So basically he ended up making like equivalent to what it would have been in today's dollars, $15 million off of that movie. He made about $1.9 million.
Oh, so he had points. Yeah, okay.
He had points. He had 10 points of the gross of the box office.
Whoa.
You know, and
that's why he made the sequel.
Yeah, so and then we could talk about that. So he did do the television movie, right? To Sir Love. Part 2 that was actually directed by Peter Bogdanovich.
I know, and it was made in '96. Yeah,
'96, and it takes place in Chicago. I've never seen it. What do you think of that?
Oh man, it's excellent. It's excellent.
Really?
It's like when I first seen it years ago, I didn't like it, but I just saw it last week because I was, you know, doing this quiz, and I'm like, you know what? Let me take a look at this again because damn, I love this movie. And so he retires. He was still at North Keith for like the 30 years. You know, they start out with a retirement. So we get to see Judy Easton and Lulu and everything like that, you know, because they come for the retirement ceremony. And but he decides to move to America, to Chicago. And initially, it was to find some woman that he met years ago because he married and his wife died and never had kids and everything. So he ends up, a friend of his who came over, you know, to work with him, you know, invited him to come teach at this school. So when he gets to the school, it's a rough school, but they were going to give him the good kids, the honor kids. But he saw these wild kids, you know, these sweat hogs, and he said, I'll take them. Nobody takes them. Are you kidding? You know, and, you know, it was that deal. And so it was the black Spanish, you know, white characters as opposed to the London kids, and it was really good, man. I really enjoyed it and stuff. It's great. It's a great movie and everything, you know. So yeah, no, it was good and stuff. Well,
Right.
anyway,
We're going to talk to this.
so
We're finishing up with
Uptown Saturday Night.
Uptown Saturday Night. Yeah. So this was basically Sidney Poitier had already directed Buck and the Preacher. He had directed
Love fucking the people. I don't know why we didn't put that on the list.
Buck and the Preacher. He ended up actually directing I think 9 movies in total, including the sequels to
Wow.
this is part of a trilogy, right? Which it's a Piece of the Action and
Yeah, that's the third one.
what's the other one?
And Let's Do It Again, which is the best one.
Let's Do It Again.
With Jimmy Walker and John Amos, yeah.
Right. And then he directed Stir Crazy, and
yes, that's right.
And a little known fact that he's lucky he probably ended up not directing this movie. He actually, from what I remember, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but he was actually up to direct the fiendish plot of Dr. Fu Manchu.
Oh my God, the one with Peter Sellers?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God he didn't do that.
I was waiting for the reaction. So.
Man.
But the movie did pretty well. It cost $2.5 million. It grossed 3 times the amount of money. NBC actually made an unsold pilot with Cleavon Little. And the last thing I can say is that they've been trying to remake this movie for close to 20 years now. And
it's now in the hands of Kevin Hart.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe that's something to be said about "Don't touch this."
Don't touch this.
Yeah.
The thing about it though is that like Uptown Saturday Night. What was fantastic about Uptown Saturday Night is that it came out in the height of the exploitation era, but it wasn't an exploitation movie. And maybe that's because Sidney was directing it, as you say. You know what I mean? It was an actual proper movie that just happened to have black characters in it.
And a black screenwriter.
And well, yeah, but I'm just trying to say it wasn't Blackenstein or Dr. Blackle and whatever. You know what I mean? It was a movie. It wasn't
right.
And that's how I think we as black African Americans, whatever, would want to see. So here was these 2 guys who were like, not down in their luck, but kind of like the Ralph Cramdens, the get rich quick schemers, like that's the role that Bill Cosby played, and Sidney was just the sidekick that went along with it. Do you know what I mean? So that way, I mean, maybe to work with his directing, he was able to, like sit back and watch Bill do things. But I think so. It's 2 guys who find out about. I mean, and who doesn't know about it, from New York, find out about these kind of like local, shebeen, or that's what they call them over here, but places where, you could go gamble, get girls and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And everything. And what it is they actually go for a night out. They're like, and I mean, who doesn't know this? The boys that we used to hang with, that was our thing, right? It's Saturday night, we're hanging out, or Friday night, whatever. And but the place gets robbed. We go on to Rome. There we go. But it gets robbed, and when it gets robbed, it's like, wait a minute, they lost something. I think it was a lottery ticket or something like that.
Yeah.
And so then that becomes the MacGuffin, and they chase down the robbers to try and get their money back. But so. What's that guy? Who was the bad guy? Because it wasn't Cleavon Little, but I forget his name.
The Nicholas brothers.
No, yeah, no, they were great, but no, the main bad guy who was in
Harry
the back. No, the guy who robbed them, Vesuvius.
Yeah.
And everything like that. But anyway, the point is that he was great, and they brought him back and Let's Do It Again, which is kind of interesting because Let's Do It Again is let's do another thing, And but I thought what was really curious is Harry Belafonte taking the role of Geechee Dan because he looked ugly. You know what I mean? And I think he purposely wanted to be ugly. You know what I mean? He wanted to be really like a slug of a man.
Right.
Because he was a beauty of a man, and he didn't want to be him. He wanted to actually play a role. And it's kind of like probably what you're saying. If he didn't work for 10 years because nobody's hired him, Sidney hired him. You see what I mean? And everything. So that was really great. And so the last thing I'll say is Piece of the Action there's a main scene in that where he's teaching the kids, how to, be proper and thing. And he takes them out on the street and, tests them against like white people, right? There's a way that you have to act, right? And everything. That self-same scene was done again in Sir Would Love 2. Exactly. You know what I mean? So, because he directed Piece of the Action, didn't he?
So he directed all three, yeah, all three of those triptych.
Yeah. So what I'm just trying to say is, so when he did Sir Would Love, he did the whole manners test on the street and everything. So it's the same scene. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to say about that. But Uptown Saturday Night, yeah, pretty good. But Let's Do It Again is my favorite of the trilogy.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like they were sort of there, those three movies, like while they were, as you're saying, not blaxploitation movies, they were in that sort of like first wave of black theme movies, right? That were so prominent.
They were like you could do a real movie with real characters and without it, even though they were black or they were the black experience, they weren't in the same vein as blaxploitation, if you get me.
Right. Why do you think that? Because I think the last one was not Uptown Saturday. What was the last one, which was done in 1977? The third one, right?
Piece of the Action.
Piece of the Action, 74.
With James Earl Jones.
Right. But by that point, blaxploitation was waning, and then even these kind of films were sort of waning too, right? So why do you think that in general, as the 70s progressed, it got to the late 70s or about 1980, a lot of these films, until Spike Lee came out later on, why was there sort of this kind of 8 or 10 year gap?
I think it was Roots. I think when Roots came out, it was
I never thought about that.
Let's get serious, because what was that? 77.
77, yeah.
And it was like, let's get serious. I remember like my family, as every other family, sat down, white family and all, sat down to watch this series. It really changed the way people looked at the African American experience. So what I say about blaxploitation is that, like, the main problem with blaxploitation films is that it was white men, saying this is what black people are like. They're single focused. And they want something, they need something, and then this is how they're going to do to achieve it. And, we'll take the idea from this or that, Hell Up in Harlem, which was Little Caesar, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, let's just do that. More breasts, and everything. Whereas this movie was a movie, and it wasn't blaxploitation because, as you should say, black writer, black director, black cast. We're taking this serious. We're making a movie. We're making a sting. And all three of those films were different confidence games. You know what I mean? And I think that's what was amazing about it, and stuff. And I don't know what came after that, but I do feel that blaxploitation stopped becoming a thing.
I mean, he did Stir Crazy. He did Stir Crazy in 1980, which was a giant hit. But at the end of the day, that's just Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, two great comedians in a prison comedy. You know what I mean? Like,
well, don't forget that began with Silver Streak.
Right. Although he wasn't involved with Silver Streak, but I know what you mean.
No. I'm not talking about Sidney. I'm talking about Richard Pryor and Wilder having a whole slew of films. Like that began with Silver Streak, and then it's like, hey, we want to do this again. And so, well, let's get Sidney so we do it properly and stuff like that. Because if you think about it, Silver Streak, what you would remember about Silver Streak is Gene Wilder in blackface.
Yeah.
That didn't happen again.
Yeah.
So that wasn't directed by Sidney Poitier.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen in a Sidney Poitier film. Exactly.
No. No, exactly. So anyway, so that brings it down to the end, man. But again, another great deep dive, another great journey, another great dig into the library and a collection of films. And maybe down below, if you guys could say, what's your favorite Sidney Poitier film? Because in that aspect, I know we missed something. We purposely didn't go to the end of the career and everything else like that. But keep the conversation going, because I think that's what's really great about this is that, like, we want people to know that we're going to actually create a Facebook page as well. to also keep the conversations going and everything, where people can actually throw up pictures or clips or whatever and everything like that, because we really like doing this dive into the library. And I mean, I know it's vast, so we're taking it a piece at a time. And if you're enjoying the journey, then ride the train with us and stuff. So I'm Chase Johnson Lynch. I'm the hijacker. That's my man Dan Disco Dano, who's the man with the facts and everything. And you know what? I will say this though, Dan, you didn't give us any casting notices. Did you not come across any casting notices on this?
Not much in the way of any of these things, no.
Well, that's probably because Sidney knew what he wanted. You know what I mean? And main thing is like, because if you think about it, as I just said about James Earl Jones being a piece of the action, if you think about it, in each of these films, Sidney made sure that the black villain, which is rare at this time of films, was an actual upright black actor. So you had like I just said, you had Geechee Dan, which was Harry Belafonte, John Amos in Let's Do It Again, and you had James Earl Jones in Piece of Action. So, classic, man. But anyway, that's me, that's you, and that's us. So, you know what? Thanks for watching. This is The Essentials.